firm. But when you read verse 10 to 13 of Daniel chapter 1, you see an interplay there, right? Though God gave Daniel favor and goodwill, Daniel had to live a real life. Jesus Christ, when he was praying for the church in John 17, he says, Father, I'm not asking that you take them away from the world, but that you keep them. Say, God does not isolate us from reality. He shows his power and his glory in reality. Several people have tried to separate themselves from the world. Oh, I want to be righteous. I'm going to heaven. No, there's one man that created a kingdom bought a property just to isolate people so that they stay away from the world so that they are righteous. You have several people that have done that. But that is against the will and the mind of God. So none of them prospered in righteousness because it's just man-made way of trying to do God's dealing. God will not support anything that is not part of his plan, right? God born us out, separated us for us to live in the world, right? So that our light and our salt will affect the world. We're called out to live in the world. We're called out, separated unto God, right? To show an example, to be him in the world. Our righteousness is not about being physically separated from the world. Yes, we're spiritually separated. We're psychologically separated. But we're not physically separated. Jesus Christ says, I'm not praying that you take them away from the world, but that you keep them from the evil one. Right? That was Jesus' prayer. Keep them from the evil one. Not that you take them away from the world, but you keep them from the evil one. That is God's prayer. That's God's idea of Christianity. It's not about buying one property and going to stay until we are the only ones, the kingdom unto God. That's not the kingdom of God. The kingdom of God is a kingdom amongst men, living righteously in the midst of an evil, wicked, idolatrous world. That is God's idea. The people have gotten it wrong, created their own doctrine, and done stupid things, and they've all failed. None of them is succeeding. Why? Because that is not God's idea. Right? God's idea is that he keeps us from the evil one, but we are living, shining example of his kingdom. It's his kingdom amongst men. Right? So even though God gave favor and goodwill to Daniel, he did not isolate him from the reality of living. He did not isolate him from the reality of life. He did not isolate him from the struggles of life. He did not isolate him from the challenges of life. Right? It's not about being isolated. It's about overcoming life. It's about overcoming the challenges of life. It's about triumphing in the midst of the struggles of life. That is God's idea. And that is what we see in Daniel's life. Even as God had told us that he has given him favor and goodwill, he now shows us how Daniel lived that life. Right? So what we see interplaying in verse 10 to 13 is that Daniel has a challenge. Even though he's God's son, he wants to do God's will, but here is he in a foreign land. He's a captive. He's a slave. He doesn't have all the right of doing things his own way. Yet he has to triumph as a righteous man. Yet he has to serve God in the midst of that. Right? So the king's meal meant that he might have to eat something that's against God's ordination of what they should not eat. They have ordination for clean and unclean meat. Right? There's no guarantee because the king, Babylon, does not have that same kind of separation. Most probably what they'll be eating might be unclean meat. Also, some of them might have been sacrificed to idol. And for him to do that, for him, he felt that would make him unclean, which is the stipulation of the law of God. So how does it then overcome this? Even though he has no right of his own, He has no authority of his own. He's more or less a slave in a foreign land, right? And that we can typify to our own challenges every day, right? We are working in an office that they could sack us, right? We don't own the company. We're an employee. Yet in the midst of being an employee, we're supposed to live righteously for God. So how do we come about that? How do we come about a boss that is trying to sleep with us, that is trying to make us steal, that's trying to make us change figures? How do we still live righteous in the midst of that? That is what we'll learn from Daniel. But we'll continue tomorrow. God helping us.